I am Chad with Not All There. We are going to be joined by Danielle of Craving Clarity, the crew over in the UK that is doing some really fascinating and amazing and great work involving the brain and addiction. And this episode is a long one. We're clocking in at just over 90 minutes, and it's just full of really good information. Just a heads up, there is a quick and brief discussion about suicide. So just a heads up on that. I don't want you to be shocked when you hear that, especially when we kind of laugh about it, because we both have we've experienced suicidal ideations, and sometimes we just need to have a chuckle about it. And I decided that it was important to leave that in there to help kind of normalize these conversations and these reactions. So just again, heads up. The rest of it, though, dude, is so incredibly fascinating, and we have a blast, and we cover a lot of really wild and very informative and important stuff in this conversation. So, due to the length, I'm getting out of here quickly. Enjoy my conversation with Danielle from Craving Clarity.
Physically, I'm camped out in my boss's office because it's one of the quieter spaces of the lab. But that means that I'm in a lab. It's part of Imperial College London, which gives away my geographic location. So although I'm from a small fishing town in Florida, I am somehow found myself here in London, in England.
I love it. I'm from a small timber fishing town in Oregon, and I'm now in a basement in Chicago, and it's it's 12 degrees outside. We are here to work towards informing ourselves. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober for over 10 years. I started drinking at the age of 18. It grabbed a hold of me quickly. And I had a nice run of about 21 years of good substance abuse, mostly alcohol, but I delved into all kinds of other fun activities along the way. I'm what you would call, I guess, a high bottom drunk. Like I never lost a job. I did damage relationships, but I never really lost any relationships due to my substance use. And my recovery has been anything but smooth. It's been amazing and beautiful. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of hard work. It involved a lot of therapy, a lot of soul searching, a lot of coming to grips or a conclusion with things in my life that I had control over certain things and certain things that I didn't. And through that, I went through a big shift. You can basically call it a nervous breakdown for about 4 to 5 years. But through that, I maintained my sobriety. I kept working and working and working because even though it was so hard, so difficult, it was better than any day I had when I was drinking at the end, which was full of turmoil and just, it was horrendous. And through all of this recovery, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my brain. I learned a lot about me as a person. I tend to go down rabbit holes, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I studied and studied and studied. I wasn't on Psychology Today or Threads or blogs. I mean, I went to the sources and read all these reports and these papers and these studies. So my mind is filled with all kinds of information that I didn't think was going to be useful until I met Danielle.
Hey.
Danielle, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. And I can start with that relevance and then work a little bit backwards as to how I got here and why I do this. And meaning that this is my job as a scientist. So I do neuroscience, specifically neuroimaging. I take pictures of people's brain structure and function, and I use different ways of using computer code and what have you to better understand how does our brain work and how is it different when we are dependent on a substance, and most importantly, how can we use therapeutic interventions, and we can talk all about what kind of interventions we're looking into,
We will.
to help people, yes, to maintain a level of sobriety that they want. But I did not start out with what I'm doing now as my goal. You say you found drink at 18. I found science a little bit later than that, because for a while before that, I was a bit of, or a lot of a mess. I was, just kind of a very troubled adolescent, run away, all sorts of craziness. And I didn't think higher education was going to be for me. Um, I failed out of my first year of uni pretty much. I was at Tallahassee Community College for my second year. And the entire reason I do science is because I showed up barefoot to my chemistry one lab, to which this man is really important, Frank Brown, instead of saying, he came to me, he was like, you need to wear shoes. And I was an asshole at the time. And I said, well, what if it's against my religion? And instead of kicking me out or putting up barriers, he said, well, sounds like an interesting religion. How about you wear these Crocs so you can attend today? We'll chat after. And just that acceptance of me as a little weirdo opened up so many doors. So he would say things like, you have a healthy disrespect for authority and ask good questions. You should consider science. So I did. And I'm going to fast forward, kind of from then on out, I kind of got my shit together. And I just, you know, we can talk about Frank as much as you want, but he really helped shape me into pursuing science and got my shit together, got ended up doing a master's in the UK and got a funded PhD. And now I'm a doctor, the useless kind of doctor.
I
But
wouldn't say that.
the reason, and the last, I know it's a bit of a monologue, but how this ties into working, doing addiction research is that as I finished my PhD, I actually spent most of it just really getting techie at getting all sorts of cutting edge methods at how we look at brain structure and function, works together to support brain function. And I felt really distanced from its potential translational or human applications, clinical applications. Even though I was a crazy person for a long time, helping other people and just being a part of other people and being a part of a positive solution to communities has always just been something I do. And I had to look at my life, and I know that so many people I know and love struggle with addiction. That is just a part of my family, friends, my community. And to me, when I had a choice as to what I could apply, what I had learned, for me, it was just that people that I know who struggle with drug and alcohol dependence or other substances, they are some of the most beautiful, amazing people I've ever met. And I've never met an addict who wants to stay or be one.
Yeah,
And so if I can be a part of the solution, awesome. And that's where I'm now.
I love it. It's really funny that we're on we're on the same coin, but just different sides of it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I have, a big part about my recovery, and I think most people's recovery or sobriety is the self-acceptance part of it. And that's the biggest hurdle to get over. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a sober person, a person in recovery to find self-acceptance. A lot of people have that problem, right? It's just the beautiful part of my life is that I was able to get there and I was able to understand it and grow with it. Now, that can be looked at as a spiritual aspect of recovery. And I think that is a huge part of it because you can only control so much in your life, and you'll drive yourself bonkers trying to be perfect or control so much of your life, right? And
Mhm.
people want to control what they don't understand, and they're also afraid of what they don't understand. And I think the beautiful part of what you're doing is you're working to find and create science and some answers for people. You can say, okay, fine, if you need that, this is what it is. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what is it? Okay, before we really get into the weeds on just so you all know, so you stick with us here, we're going to talk about what fuck it means when it comes to relapse or an
Yeah.
addiction. It could be relapse on a substance. It could be a case of the fuck it's can lead to anything in recovery. Bad
Mm.
choices, picking the bottle back up, shooting up again, whatever it might
Mhm.
be. Um, it's all a part of recovery that we as a person in recovery have to deal with on a constant basis. And something is happening with that, right? It's not just magic. Something happens in my brain that causes me to want to have that fifth scoop of ice cream, right? Maybe not a beer, but by God, somebody's like, how about a scoop of ice cream? I'm like, how about 10? Fuck it. Give all of them to me. So before we get into that, why don't you talk about what the work is that you're doing and what we hope to kind of to fill in for you through this conversation.
That would be so helpful. And I hope interesting to anybody who listens, because that's the dangerous question. You ask an academic what they do or what they're interested in, and that sets off a long conversation. But I think I'll start with saying how all these years of neuroscience have shaped how I look at the brain. And I look at the brain through networks. And what a network means to me is a coalition or group of brain regions that work together to support a process. So, for example, I'm talking right now, and I've got a whole group of regions that are moving my mouth, understanding what words are, forming words in my brain, what have you. But I talk with my hands. So at the same time, my voluntary motor network, a group of regions that control all these sorts of things I'm doing. And then I have my visual network. So I have a bunch of different processes operating in parallel at the same time. And what I'm really curious about is two things. Number one, when somebody is about to relapse and they have that bucket moment, how are the different neural substrates or underpinnings of those processes in those moments? What happens? How is so I and what is driving that? I often think of, we talk in a lot in the research field about reward and anti-reward systems and how that shapes what we want to do, what we pay attention to, whatever. And the reason I care about all of this, right? Because you could just say, well, that's just a descriptive exercise, and that doesn't help anybody. The whole point that I do this is that I study the brain to understand it so I can effectively develop two types of therapy. So one of them, and I'm going to say before I even say what they are, is that these therapies are not meant to be in isolation. I mean, again, I'm not the useful kind of medical doctor, but anytime I've seen, anybody who's been in sobriety or recovery for a long time, they just give so much credit to peer recovery, to therapy. So I'm not saying get rid of that, but I'm saying what may help people, and especially in the vulnerable parts of early recovery. Non-invasive brain stimulation, not ECT. This is not One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This is like, I've had it more times than I can count. It's super mild, but that's the problem. It's often not a very strong effect. So how can we boost that, target that, personalize that? And number two, psychedelic assisted therapy.
Mm.
So one of the labs I work in, I'm a part of 3 labs, and one of them is the Center for Psychedelic Research at Imperial. And so we're starting our first psychedelic assisted therapy study for, in this case, it's people who are dependent on heroin.
Mm.
And part of the job is to assess the therapeutic outcomes. Does that work? Do they relapse? Or if they do, is it at lower rates than everything else? And number two, why? What does it change in brain function? So that's kind of the world I'm mostly within.
Excellent. Okay, now, boy, okay, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. All right. I think that let's kind of focus on the psychedelic treatment, because that seems to be more of, I don't know if in vogue is correct, but there's a lot of information out there that you can find now, whether it's through Netflix or any other streaming device or online. There's a lot of information out there that people can consume and digest that has to do with psychedelic treatments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the American football player Aaron Rodgers, who's just a major douchebag, but he went on an ayahuasca trip and kind of
Yeah.
talked about that. Now, say what you will about him and this process, because he really is just a dipshit. But if you can cut through that, you can hear
Mm.
what it did for him, and it's sort of fascinating. Now his situation is different than other people because he's trying to decide if he should keep playing football and get paid lots of money. Well, I
Tough noises.
tough. Yeah, really. That's why you're down there in the Amazon doing that. I mean, of course you had to go all the way down there. Anyway, whatever. Never mind. That's just, I'm a Bears fan. He played for Green Bay. It's just, this is like some resentment that I have to work through. Anyway, What I'm getting at is, you know, lots of people are using, at least from my perspective and the stories that I've been told from individuals who have done it, is they're using it to sort of open themselves up to get through or past, or I don't like to use the word, but to simplify it, to get over certain
Mm,
emotions that they have, certain
mm.
emotional blocks that they have, maybe an emotional trauma. I know somebody that did oh God, mushrooms. What's
Yeah,
psilocybin? Excuse me, the
yeah, yeah.
psilocybin in a controlled environment with a shaman. But they were having challenges emotionally because a sibling had passed, and it was just really hard to grieve and to sort of make peace with that. So they went through this process and were able to find a way to make peace with it. In some respects, that can be what it's like in recovery is guilt, shame,
Yeah,
actions in the past, right? Like you can't ever get over it because it happened. What are you going to do? Right? That's a
yeah.
tough thing. It happened to you,
Mhm.
pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Like, no, don't do that, but you got to find a way to make peace with it.
Yeah.
So, saying that, setting the table for that. So, the psychedelic treatment, what is, I guess, the goal that people are hoping to achieve with that science? What is it that they're looking to, what gaps, I guess, are they looking to fill in, or what is the whole process, and what's the hopeful outcome?
Yeah. So many great questions and comments in this. And I think one important thing to kind of highlight between is that there are many different types of ways people use psychedelics, right? Of course, there's the recreational use, and then you've already mentioned a few different kind of, I guess we can call it indigenously inspired uses with people with
Yes.
shamans or what have you. And then there's the more kind of like medical model, which is a weird one. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that psychedelic research is in this, as you're completely correct, it's very in vogue, it's very sexy, but it's not the first time it has been. We really in at least the Western world, around the 50s, 60s, 70s, like that's when psychedelics had their previous heyday. Uh, and now, as we're thanks to differences in rescheduling and this resurgence, and we're seeing its utility, we're trying to be really conscious not to make some of the same mistakes of the past.
Mm.
Granted, that period there was so much groundbreaking research, but now we're kind of sitting here being like, okay, what did we miss? What are we trying to do? And I think that early work really put into the concept of set and setting in terms of like how you take the psychedelic and in what environment and the intentions you set and the support and container you have during that experience
Hmm.
really shapes what happens. But
Okay.
today's model and in our lab, it is not just about what we call the acute psychedelic experience known as the trip, right? The trip is powerful. The trip can be mind bending,
Yes.
but that is not everything, and that's really important. So, in the process of what psychedelic assisted therapy is what we refer to it as step one is not taking the drug. It's seeing should you take the drug.
Mm.
It's a process of screening, preparation, discussion. There's a whole ethical dilemma
Yeah,
about
of course.
how do we even consent people to an experience that we can't even describe that's
Right.
different for everyone, right? So you have you have the acute, and
Hmm.
as you said, right, some people, again, what the intention or therapeutic utility of that psychedelic may vary from, person to person and what they're coming for. So for some people, um, not being able to experience emotions and kind of let them out and kind of grieve and then kind of realize what they can do to resolve that. For some people, right?
Yes.
Maybe you're using because, you're trying to just numb a lifetime of trauma or even a
Mhm.
trauma that happened when you were younger.
Right.
And, this is just what you know or what you were exposed to. And you're in this cycle. You don't want to be in this cycle, but you don't understand why you keep doing it and you learn. The thing is with a trip is everybody's typically I refer to it as you uncover some truth, but now we hit the final part of psychedelic assisted therapy because while that's powerful, if you don't do anything afterwards to live up to that, to integrate that knowledge in your life, that's a nice trip, but it doesn't do anything for you. So That's why we then continue therapy onwards. And we have what's called integration. That's where we integrate the things you may have experienced during the trip into this therapeutic, process that you're going through. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the most
Yeah. Okay. No, that's awesome, because that brings me up to it. This is what it made me think of what you just said. And
Mhm.
I did a lot of ecstasy, which was whatever, I mean, psychedelic, sure, but I think the more of the thing that people think about with a trip the most is either like acid, never did it, but I did do my fair share of mushrooms.
Mhm.
And if you don't, like anything, if you overdo it, it'll take you into a place that is upsetting and frightening. And what I'm going to get to here is that in simplistic terms, in a lot of recovery groups, I use 12 steps. It's sort of like my baseline, but my for me, and I think it's important for everyone listening that is in recovery, is that you like you as a human being, you grow and you evolve, and your recovery needs to grow and evolve with that. All right, whatever that
Mhm.
might be. Um, the 12 steps for me are my baseline. I have a program system, whatever you'd like to refer to it as, in place. And so if I ever hit a snag, and I have a place that I can land where I know I can like restart, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so part of what we talk about in that form of recovery is there's this emptiness inside, this hole.
Mm.
People always use cliches like the hole in the donut. And to me, that that is true. There is sort of an empty space inside of you, right? And but that space is not necessarily physical. It's more of an emotional feeling, right?
Yeah.
Let's use an example like traumas in my life happened, okay?
Yeah.
And I found a way to isolate myself from those. And but that limited what I could allow myself to feel and think and do, right? Therefore, for me, it actually physically kind of created this circle, this hole. And when I
Mm.
would take mushrooms, for example, it would lead me to the edge of that hole and it would scare the shit out of me, right? And
Yep.
so through various trips, I would find my way to get around it, but never into it, never look inside of it, never see what was
Mm.
really in there. And so, what you're
Interesting.
the way that you're describing this treatment is that it's sort of like, okay, we'll take you up to the edge of the hole, right? But we need to continue on through it so you can look in there, feel it, accept it, recognize that these emotions or these sensations or these triggers are normal and okay. Am
Mm.
I am I kind of close with it?
It's really interesting because I think that, scientists are maddeningly non-absolute, or at least the humble ones are, because I am not a that's the thing. So I'm about to start learning how to guide psychedelic sessions for healthy controls, but the therapeutic side of what you do in a trip, I've heard everything from you let the participant or patient do it themselves. You actually don't interfere while they're really tripping because that is a very internally directed process. It's very fragile. But sometimes you have to be prepared for people who want you to kind of reassure them, be there. There's a whole level of ethics about what you can do to support somebody through that.
Right. Okay.
But and then it depends on the drug you're taking. So for people who do ketamine or MDMA based therapy, if you do more of a lower dose, you can have this therapeutic conversation during that psychedelic experience. But if you're on 5-MeO DMT, good luck, you're in another plane. So it
Right.
really
Right.
depends on what you're taking. But I think you hit on the key thing, which is whether that's through the acute experience itself or otherwise you've probably already identified the whole, right?
Right.
People are smart, they know where their spots are, but it's how do you kind of confront that under let's put it this way, how do you make the whole familiar in a way that you hadn't? Like, where is this whole coming from? And what can you do to, do you even need to close it? Is that possible? Is there
No,
ways
you
you
don't
can
need to
bubble?
close it. No, that's it. You don't need to close. You just need to see what's in there and accept it. And that's the
Yeah.
difficult part, because for some people that acceptance is really, really hard
Yeah.
because of whatever experiences are. Now, granted, some people have incredibly insane, difficult, traumatic experiences in life that started at an early age. That doesn't make them better or different. It's just we're all different, created differently, wired differently, however you want to put it. Experiences
Mhm.
are experiences and they have the effect that they have. There's no one, it's not a pissing contest, right? We're not trying to one up
Exactly.
that stuff. And I think that
Exactly.
that needs to be recognized and stopped. Like, oh, that happened to you. Well, wait till you hear what happened to me. And I was guilty of doing that, and that's what honestly, I got a lot of free drinks out of that in my life. Oh yeah, well, but to kind of use where we are right now
Mm,
makes me think, well, the looking in the hole. We're gonna
mm,
use, I think that this metaphor is very simple and easy for people to digest. So we're at the hole. We all have it in some capacity in ourselves.
mhm.
So in not even in recovery, but in active addiction, I think that you will find more often than not, if you're speaking with a person that while they were in active addiction, so many times we told ourselves, I'm not going to do it today. I'm not going to do it today. I'm not going to do it today. And before that day ended, we got a case of the fuck-its and we just did it.
Yes.
For
Yes.
me, for me, and this is the only, you've got me. So, but from my perspective and
Yeah.
in listening and thinking about what we're going to talk about today is that that hole is filled with things that we don't want to really acknowledge, right?
Yeah.
Now it can be filled with positive things. It doesn't always have to be negative things. And in my
Mhm.
case, and this has always been difficult for me, is like I have a fear of success. I have a fear of happiness. I have a fear of being accepted. I have a fear of liking myself, right? Just
Yeah.
simply like looking in the mirror and being like, hey, there you are. Like
Yeah.
every day. And some days I'm just like, oh, fuck you, man. Right. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
I can, whether it takes me a moment or a few hours, I can get through that, right? So many
Yes.
people can't because the emotions that live within this hole, right? This
Mhm.
emptiness that we feel, this unrecognizable part of ourselves that we try and fill with substances
Yeah.
are it's really just an emotion. And if you
Yeah.
can't, if you're an adult, right? I got sober at 39. So by the time I turned 40, I was feeling emotions that I had never felt in my life. 40 years of my life, and I'm feeling
Yeah.
these emotions for the first time. Something's going on up here, right?
Yep.
Something making me feel these emotions. But the addiction, if you will, is still very much alive. And through that, uh, it's almost Pavlovian. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like this trained reaction. I feel this, I have to do that.
Yep.
So taking that into account, can you kind of, give us a scientific breakdown on what that might look like inside of someone's active brain? So
Oh
if
my God. Yes.
is there yeah. So if for anyone out there, just find a diagram of a brain. Can you give us an idea of like so an addiction lives in the addiction, whatever it is, it lives inside our brain, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the addiction's in one part of the brain and impulse control is in another, right? Or
This is the issue. I mean, the thing I think addiction is everywhere in the
it
brain.
is.
It's the
Okay,
crazy
cool.
thing.
Cool. All right. Well, then lay it on us. So, okay, here we are. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll give you let's use a simple example and we're not going to make it about substances. We're going to make it about something in recovery. So,
Okay.
a lot of people in recovery, we love ice cream,
Yes.
especially alcoholics. I think it's just because of the sugar and whatever, we can't ever seem
It's
to get rid
cold.
of
It's
that.
refreshing. Like
People
whatever it is.
who become vegan and cut out sugar and bread, fuck off. Okay, you just I'm just saying people in recovery that do that. It's just like you're being an asshole. Really?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
I mean,
Like
you're
this is I I'm
own
like
it.
there's food for the body and there's food for the soul, and I
Yeah.
believe in a balance in all things.
Exactly. Exactly, man. So let me have my ice cream. So like that's a problem for me is indulgence of food. All right. Okay.
Mm,
Mostly sweets now. That's my thing. Like, so if there's ice cream in the house, it's gone. Like my kids are
yep.
like, Dad ate the ice cream again. I'm like, I'm sorry. But that is still an impulse that I have
Yeah.
trouble controlling, right?
Yeah.
Like it just sort of happens. happens. Like I'll be just scooping it in, and that's the fuck it. Each scoop is a fuck it.
Yes.
And I know a lot of my friends from Thursday night that have the get together with me here every Thursday night. You know what I'm talking about. I've seen you eat the cake.
Ah,
So,
ah.
uh, so let's take that example then. Okay, all right, we've got the ice cream, we've got the bowl,
Mm,
and we
yeah,
can't. So what's happening up here in our head?
brilliant. Okay. So we could there's like four different lenses we could look at that moment. So let's start with the first time you ever had ice cream before that. And we'll very quickly move forward. The first time you had ice cream, you had a wallop of sugar and fat hit your tongue that sent a bunch of reward signals coursing through your brain, deep, deep, deep within the brain, in the center of this wrinkled pink walnut we all have. There are a few areas that produce dopamine, the substantia nigra, the ventral tegmental area. These have projections, these connect to areas that go all throughout the brain. So we get this rewarding, high calorie deliciousness. Now, both really positive and really negative things
Right.
will create entrenched neural pathways. And so this really positive experience cements this substance that starts out spherical and turns gloopy, or actually, I'm going to eat it so quickly it doesn't even have a chance to turn gloopy.
Fuck
We
no.
like this, we want this. Okay, so that's encoded ice cream as good. If it was, and if this was a drug, or we wanted to talk about, there's this guy, Koob is his last name, and he talks about the three stages of acquiring and maintaining a dependence. And this is kind of that binging intoxication phase. So it
Okay.
encodes reward. Fine. That is not most of it, right? Most people, like most of the time when we use, or when people in recovery talk about using that, I've heard it's to escape a bad. So, how does something go from seeking that high of ice cream or whatever it is, to using a substance to just get by?
Right.
And so this starts to get into the neural adaptive process of it. Now we're not going to talk about how drugs affect the brain because we're just talking about ice cream. So when we're sitting in front of that ice cream, we've already talked about how we've encoded it as rewarding. That reward has what's called incentive drive. Our brain, even though our top down cognitive control, goal directed brain says, I don't want it, I don't need it, I shouldn't have it. You are then combating systems of attention because you can't stop thinking about or looking at the ice cream. Food noise is a term I hear a lot in the kind of like food addiction space. So that ice cream is giving you a lot of food noise. You're going to pay a lot of attention to it. What do we got? We've got attention, we've got inhibition. So you may be more disinhibited, even though you're trying to say, I don't want to do this. Your brain has been programmed from this, we call it top down versus bottom up. These
Okay.
bottom up tend to be more of these like really primal, reward driven
The lizard brain, if you will.
brain. As a person from Florida, zips up skin suit. I I relate. And
Makes this
so
kind
it's
of
really that's saying like, yes, eat this, fuck this, do this, we want this. And but my question is, so this is actually what we're doing when we do that. All that you notice, all I've talked about is that original encoding and
yeah.
maybe how it relates to some other processes. But a huge part of my research now is like, what happens? How does that all connect when you say fuck it? Because that I feel like, and actually correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm like, that is the time that a therapy would be really fucking useful. Is if
Yeah.
it could help you
Yeah.
not say fuck it.
Yeah.
But I need to translate that in from this language we're using into numbers and symbols and images and all of that. So I
Okay.
need human words.
So, okay, I'm your guinea pig, so we're just going to use my experiences. Now, it's different every time. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, it sometimes it's like I've earned it. Okay.
Mhm.
You can look at the positive reward aspect of it. Right? I've earned it. I haven't had it in a long time. I've been good. I worked out today. I've been honest, whatever.
Mhm.
Part of recovery is sometimes, actually, I shouldn't say anytime. Okay. In my humble opinion and in my experience, in order to really have a thriving life in recovery of sobriety, is that you really have to rip it down to the studs, if you will. Like you got to
Yeah.
kind of you got to tear yourself down emotionally inside in order to kind of like put it back together, right? I
Mm.
forget what I think it's the Japanese art where they break
Kintsugi. Yep.
kintsugi, thank you, and put it back together, and it's
Yeah.
art, but it's almost more beautiful than it was before they broke it.
Absolutely.
Um, so you've got the positive aspect of it, right?
Mm.
I've earned it. It's a good thing. You go to the gym, you work out, you're like, I'm going to reward myself with some ice cream. Fine.
Yeah.
But then there's that time where you're like, oh, it's in the house. Oh, everybody's asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
This
okay.
opportunistic
It's,
side.
it's
Yeah.
opportunistic. Yeah, no one's gonna
Yep.
know. No one's gonna know. Then and that with the no one's gonna know, that goes to the emotional rush that you get when you're telling a lie, when you're hiding your addiction, when you're out in the street trying to buy your drugs or sneaking, in to buy your beer, whatever. That the
Yeah.
hiding aspect that no one's gonna know, that there's a real like it is like an electrical charge that goes through your body. It's this huge rush. You kind of get tunnel vision. Nothing else around you like means anything. And,
Mm.
an old therapist of mine caught me in it one time. He's like, you didn't even see me. He's like, I watched you like march across the parking lot. You got in your car and you left.
Oh my
You went to the
God.
store and got booze, right? And I'm
Oh
like,
my God.
yeah, I did. He's like, it was fascinating, man. It's like, fuck. It was really
Wow.
it was hard to hear. It was really hard to hear. But
Yeah.
like, that's what it's this tunnel vision. And
Yeah.
that is that will go to that's another aspect of having the ice cream, right? This like no one's gonna know, but the no one's gonna know
Mm.
it triggers this dishonesty part of you, the lying, the hiding, the cheating, the stealing, right? But there's this rush, this emotion that comes with that really is like that's fuck it. Then there's the part that is like the self-loathing aspect of it,
Yeah.
the self-hate aspect of it, right? Like oh god,
Yep.
oh god. But the real tricky one is you say fuck it, but you don't know why. You-
Yeah.
You're just
Yes.
doing it, right? You're just doing it.
You're not even like enjoying it. Like I was
No.
literally eating late at night, like 2 nights ago, I was PMSing hard and I've been like really good lately. And
Yeah.
I just started eating bread, hummus, and pickles. And I just like couldn't stop. I
Ah.
wasn't really hungry. And I was like, oh, I'll have another half a slice or whatever, like an annoying thing that people
Yeah.
tell themselves.
Yeah.
And then I'm like a half a loaf, like, but I'm sitting there being like, oh, I'm just going to finish after that. But I'm already like slicing the next one.
Yeah.
Like, is that so this is where so when we're talking about all these different flavors of fuck it and doing it, the one that I feel like research is really good at, or at least like we're focused on a lot, is the oh, I'm really sad, I'm going to use it to feel better. Because from a neuroscience perspective, we can be like, okay, here's these stress circuits,
It's
and that
coping, it's the hug that they need.
and that's the psychology side, like even the neuroscience of like
Yeah.
there are these substance P is a stress hormone that
Yeah.
binds in the amygdala and la 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 la. But I feel like that is misrepresentative of, for example, nobody that I've talked to, and I really need to caveat this, I probably should have done it earlier, is that my work is so interdisciplinary. Sometimes I feel like a total novice when it comes to addiction research or substance misuse and dependence, peer, all this stuff. So I've saturated a lot of my life in it. And part of that is realizing how much I don't know and knowing that there's more that I don't know that I don't know. And so everything I say, if it's wrong, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm learning too. That's my job is to learn. So humble moment aside,
I'm learning too, man. I haven't figured this shit out.
but nobody talks about this electricity that you just described. Like that
No,
was most of what we talked about.
it is, and I don't know if I've just had the benefit to be able to translate it into that, but I mean, for me anyway, physically, it is like a charge, right?
Yeah.
And I experienced a lot of physical, emotional, mental trauma as a kid, and it started very young for me. I was around 3 when it all
Mhm.
started. So I had a lot of physical things happen to me that required me to kind of enter the shutdown mode, and you know,
Yeah.
to lock off a lot of things. the fight or flight aspect, and I have been locked in fight mode my entire life. So
Yeah.
and I've gotten a lot better at recognizing it. I've gotten a lot better at recognizing my triggers and being able to dismiss these things. Um, my body's going to react how it's going to react, and I'm going to have these sensations, but I'm patient enough and knowing enough that it's going to pass. If I have to
Yeah.
break, I have to lie down. If it whatever I need to do, it's fine, right? It's just going to pass.
Yeah. Yep.
And but similarly, my body will feel that way when my addiction kicks in, when the fucking kicks
Mm.
in. It feels like that. Um, when I was early on in therapy, one of my therapists asked me to describe if I were to say what my trauma felt like, what is it? I was like, well, it's just basically like this ball of fire. Like if I'm like Iron Man is how I would say. Like Iron Man had this whatever thing in his chest, but that's sort of like if you were to paint a picture, it was like I had this sort of like glowing energy in me. Um, Now that obviously is a traumatic response. But that though is what fuck it feels like for me. Is it's sort of this whole embodiment of my system. So I
Yeah.
don't know if so with trauma reactions in the brain, what is there any correlation between how the brain functions with a traumatic response than with a response to an addiction, or are they two separate things?
That is such a wild question, and I love it. So, which is a roundabout way of saying I have no fucking clue. But
Cool.
what I will say is that when I think of this fight or flight that you've been describing, this really kind of up, almost manic,
Yeah,
everything can
heightened,
be a little
just
bit
way heightened.
brighter, and
Yeah.
you just yep, and that. So what I'm trying to do in my research when you say that, I immediately am thinking of neurotransmitters, but not just one. Like I'm if anybody talks to me only about dopamine and says that's the answer to everything, I will, you know,
Punch them.
um, just because we do all the time, and it's fine. It's my own. That's my own personal like
Yeah.
impatience.
Yeah.
But I'm immediately trying to think about it in terms of like, you know, the the noradrenergic system, the basically adrenaline and stress, and where are those receptors, where are they in space in terms of the brain, and then what does that activate in concert, and how the hell does that relate to all of these overlapping systems. Now, something that I'm seeing again and again, and I hope maybe you can help me better understand this, is when we talk about reward driving processes and we think about, then whenever I look into the data, I want to see areas in the reward and stress circuitry light up. And what I find more often is differences in how networks associated with self-talk, like you said, autobiographical recall, self-processing, goal direction, that network, and one that's about kind of goal-directed cognition, decision making, show changes in connectivity and their ability to coordinate with basic sensory processing networks, vision, voluntary emotion, somatoception, like how things like feel, taste, smell. Um, I don't understand what that means. So can you actually, does any of that spark anything for you? Because it comes up
Yeah.
over and over again, and I
Yeah.
have no idea what to make of these results.
So, I think that I do. So I'm gonna start with this, and we're gonna see if I'm on to something with what you said. So,
Mm,
um, when I was 10 years old, my house burned down,
mm,
and there was and it was very traumatic. And unfortunately, at the time in my family, we didn't discuss anything, and so it was basically you just put it down inside and keep it away. We're not going to talk about it, and we never really
right.
did. Um, Aside from that, so I had this emotional response to the trauma of losing everything that I had. All we had was what we were wearing. We had an
Wow.
amazing community. By the end of the day, we did have some fresh clothes and like a camping trailer to sleep in. So we weren't like abandoned. However, I got up and I went to school and I came home like 3 hours later and everything I knew was gone. Right.
Wow.
And my dad was like, hey, like, you can wander through your room if you want, which is weird because it was like mostly gone. But
Yeah.
there was this smell. right? The charred smell of everything that I knew. My
Oh,
life had this smell, right? And so, but it isn't like a campfire smell. It's not like a kitchen fire smell. It's even like if you happen to drive by a house fire. It's this specific char smell that is really, I don't know, I guess unique. And I only smell it every once in a while. But when
mm,
I do, I have this crazy emotional reaction to it. And I would smell, but see, when I was drinking
mm,
and I would talk about that story while I was drinking, the smell would come back to me.
right.
Right. So I don't know
Mm.
if it is like a smell or some kind of sensory that triggered the addiction. Is that kind of where we're going with this?
I don't know. That's the thing is like so I've noticed it mostly in so the data sets that I'm working with most often now are people who are um, who who were dependent on heroin, so not
Okay.
prescription opioids, but just straight up heroin,
Yeah.
and they're methadone maintained now. And so for the past year, I've just been looking at this data over and over and over. Now I'm applying the same analysis to data sets provided by people who are addicted to crack, meth, alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, whatever, just to see
What
the
do you
similarity.
see? Is there a similarity?
I ask me again in a year. So I
Okay.
have an amazing student joining me, Marco Reed, who's going to be looking at this. But all of these data are from the Enigma Addiction Working Group, and so and it's an amazing thing because it's so hard to collect data from people in scientific studies, especially because it's so damn expensive. So if you wanted to sit in the scanner for me for half an hour, one, I pay you. So you'd get at least 20 pounds over here. I almost said 20 quid. That's like British slang for like, it's like a British equivalent of like 20 bucks.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it costs, I think, 370 pounds to the university just to use the center, and that's like for a half hour, which is not long in
No.
fMRI. Other neuroimaging is cheaper, but all this to say is like getting data from people is really, really precious. And it's so nice that there are things that exist where I can, so I'm grateful the lab I joined had just finished collecting data on 26 people who are heroin dependent, but that can now join a pool of every other lab that joins this consortium that wants to share their data. And that way I can ask questions like, are the things I found in our data set, do they translate in data sets acquired across the US, across the
Mm,
UK,
right, right,
Australia, Western
right.
Europe, and hopefully elsewhere? So I can't speak to the generalizability yet, but I can say that I would expect there to be some similarities and differences. We do see in big studies on changes in brain shape and brain function that there are some differences depending on what your primary substance of dependence was. I'm very well aware that, if you're an active user, like if you can't get your favorite, something else will do.
Right, of course.
Um, yeah, so but so that's like most of our but that's really interesting because drugs affect the brain differently, right? If I take heroin or I smoke heroin, then I'm activating my opioid system, which then activates the dopaminergic reward system, la la la. But if I'm doing it with crack at the same time and I'm speedballing, then I'm getting kind of a bit of a double whammy. I mean, we all know taking multiple drugs at the same time is not uncommon and
Oh
it's
no,
different. Oh no, it's
no,
not.
it's not.
It's, and we sometimes seek that out, right? Like that's the whole reason speedballing as a name is because it's for some people better than just one at a time. Like, so all this to say is like, I actually don't even remember where this
Well, we
came
were
from.
talking about like, so no, I had this reaction to a certain
Yes.
smell, a certain, but
Yes.
that would,
Oh my God.
I don't know if it was a
I'm
traumatic
such an
response, a
asshole. I
flashback.
forgot it
No,
came from your like
no, it's
childhood
fine. It's
trauma.
fine. It's fine. We have the ability to edit if we need to. Oh God. Hang on a second. I got to get rid of my dog. I'll be right back.
Go for it. Go for
Jesus.
it.
All right, I'm back.
Yay!
She likes to hang out down here with me, and then all of a sudden she's like, I gotta go.
And you're like, oh, babes, okay.
Yeah. All right. So is there, I'm trying to think here. Trying to find a framing method here. So what is it about addiction that affects the brain? Let's maybe just see, kind of break it down like real basic. Like, okay, I is it here's a good question. Here we go. Again,
Okay.
we can edit. But people believe that they may be predisposed to an addiction. Okay. And in my family, it's generational, right? Generational substance use and addiction, generational trauma, right? And it just continues to flow and flow and flow. Now, trauma can be passed through DNA. At least that's what I've read and I've been told by people. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it seems logical to me. And through that, is an individual's brain predisposed to addiction of any kind? That reward, I guess, that is created through addiction or provided through addiction. Have you found that to be true at all?
So I know that I have read that there is a genetic or hereditary component to addiction, but we don't understand it well. And the
Okay.
point of that is because it's kind of like the difference between saying, I notice that in families that have generations of people who struggle with drug and alcohol dependence or what have you, um, that they tend to pass it down, and but then there's a difference between being able to notice that and then be able to say, and here's a gene. So first of all, there is not an addiction gene. If there was, we would have found it. So now we're looking into what we call polygenic risk scores. So factors across many, many different genes. And let's
Okay.
think about, what does that mean? Like, why do genes matter from a
Right.
neuroscience perspective?
Sure.
To me, what that means is that genes are eventually become proteins. Proteins become neurotransmitters. They become the receptors that hold those. They become the way that the brain maybe is shaped, that the way it communicates across itself. And so, better understanding how trauma, again, this is an area of research where I've read the studies where if you take a mouse when she's pregnant and is put through stress, then her offspring will be more likely to exhibit XYZ factors that do not exist in the same litter or what have you. Um, I'm familiar with that concept. I can't explain why it happens. So again, and I think that this kind of bent of me not knowing is because I'm trying to think about how these biological processes and these physiological processes at a very cellular and molecular level, which we can identify in animals or in dead tissue from humans through histology. That's one thing, seeing how that comes to life. And that's not even getting into the spatial scale differences, which is the fact that, like, if I want to talk about how a gene is more likely with a bunch of other genes to react differently to the introduction of a drug, how does that play out? Because that gene is present in all of these different cells. And how does that shape what we just deem and experience? And it's that bridge that I'm really, really, really struggling to connect. So I guess I'd summarize my answer with, like, it seems important and we haven't figured out how it is yet.
Okay. Well, then let me ask this.
Mm.
Is each brain unique, or are we kind of born with, is every brain's kind of like, do we start at the same place, or is each individual's brain unique to them?
Everybody's brain is unique.
Okay.
It's like fingerprints, right? We've pretty much all got fingerprints, but everyone's fingerprint is different. We've all got brains. Some of us have more or less wired different, created different, like
Okay.
you said earlier, but they're all unique. And that's the thing is, so if you want to take a physics perspective, right? Now, hopefully we haven't just lost half the people listening to this, but if you take a big perspective, it's called a dynamical system, meaning it's not like you are born with the brain that you die with. It changes based on your experience, literally. Like you could look at are you familiar with the taxi cab driver hippocampus studies? The London
Yeah,
taxi driver?
yes, a little bit. Yeah, but fill us in. Yeah, I am.
It's so cool because in London, first of all, it's insane. Like if you are they call them like the black cabbies because they're like black taxi cabs.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you want to take the exam, you study every single street and way to get from point A to point B because they could quiz you on any of it. And they've studied taxi cab drivers before, like as they're learning, and then after they pass the test. And the size of the hippocampus changes in volume. Literally, you're like filling up your brain with that much information. It attenuates because the whole beauty of the brain is that we have limited space. So, how do we efficiently wire it so that all the information that we have, our experiences, can be accessed? But that's just a limited example of the fact that a person is going through this part of their life. They're cramming so much knowledge in, their brain changes. One part gets bigger. And then as that becomes more procedural, it actually, like, if I remember correctly, goes back to like quote unquote normal or like what their baseline was because it's offloaded that
So
large
you're literally
volume. And
filling your brain with information, and then it distributes.
exactly. And then that is so this ties into maybe a little bit about that smell that you talked
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
So olfaction, smell is it is the only sense in our body that does not pass through the thalamus, i.e. a gatekeeper. Smell goes directly to kind of the rest of the brain. Again, I don't do olfactory research, but I
Yeah,
do
yeah.
know that you encode memories through smell so strongly, more than you do through touch. Even music, we talk about how it'll bring back a moment, good or
Sure.
bad. Now, let me also talk about one more thing in terms of how we encode memories and maybe how they drive things later down the road is because when we have a negative memory,
Mhm.
something that's really unexpected in general, especially unexpected our brains remember that shit.
Yeah, they
Our
do.
brains hard code that. We do not like pain. We do not want that again. We will avoid that. We will numb that. And we will often sometimes even bring that up over and over again to be like, hey, remember that? You don't like that. You don't want to do that. Or you don't want to feel that. So, like, what are we going to do? So, this is maybe where genetic predisposition, and this is for any other neuroscientists listening to this, I'm just spitballing here, don't kill me over this, but maybe this is where things like how that process of negative experience or positive experience encoding gets stored, and then how that drives what we do, what we pay attention to, what we decide to do, the narratives we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
Those are processes that I kind of tried to think about how initial reward system pathways like that shape all the other shit.
So if we think about like, okay, the cabbies and the studying that they have to do, how the brain literally part of the brain fills up with information and then disperses it. Can the same be said for experiences, positive or negative in a life? So for example, let's just say trauma is if there's repeated trauma, will that happen? Will the brain fill up with these experiences and then spread them throughout the brain in the same kind of way?
Oh, I think, okay, so there is a study that typically labs aren't allowed to do anymore because it's considered unethical, but I'm about to describe it. So,
Rip,
in
rip.
psychology literature, have you heard of the Morris Water maze and learned helplessness?
No.
It is so basically what happens is you have a rat and it's in picture like a cute little swimming pool. And in the middle there's a little column. So you put the rat in the column.
Mhm.
And let's say like if the pool is circular, like maybe 90 degrees, like just to the right hand side, there's a little platform. So it's in the middle of the pool and there's like a clear platform to get out of the pool on its right. The central column drops, so the rat is now swimming, right?
Okay.
And it needs to get out because it'll get tired and drown. And it notices the platform, it'll swim to it, it'll climb up on it. Fine. Um, there are experiments that look at now if you do load, so it learns that that platform is there, that's the one to go to. Then they'll do it where there's no platform. and they'll look at how long it took the rat to kind of explore and keep swimming and swimming and to anthropomorphize it, hoping and hoping before it just gives up. That is called learned helplessness when you just, no matter what, can't avoid the bad. The shit just keeps coming and this kind of fight or flight circuitry just kind of gives up. And and that is something that is really tough. And I don't know how that, does any of that resonate with
Oh
you?
yeah,
Like, how
man.
does that?
That's a fuck it. That's fuck it
Yeah.
right there.
So
It's
that's that. Yeah.
that's really kind of, I mean, for a lot of people.
Mm.
And it can be, I guess, maybe fuck it in a way is a learned behavior, because a lot of us, if you want to, you know, use an allegory that, swimming and swimming and swimming, trying to find that way out that is no longer there,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And eventually just giving up. Um,
Yeah.
During active addiction, that really is the case. Is that you're swimming and you're swimming and you're swimming, and the methods of the way out no longer work, whether it was exercise, whether it was reading a book, whether it was journaling, whatever you were using as a perceived distraction or a way out or a safety net, it no longer works. And for those who are fortunate enough to get out of that concept, that memory, that emotion still remains, right? And you fight it and you fight it and you fight it and you fight it. But that's sort of the part, is like the rat swimming is more like a fight, right?
Yes. Yes.
But then, okay, so there's the fighting, 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 you're tired, you give up.
Mm.
But it's also like, okay, well, let's think about like how not fight harder, but fight smarter, right? So I guess you would find a way to get out of that in some other capacity. There's another way out. There's always going to be another way out. I don't know if that was ever part of the study or not, but for me, that is sort of like the fuck it part of it, is that it is, you just feel lost and lost and lost, lost, and you give up. And that sensation of giving up is just, it's sort of comfortable in a way, right? Because it brings a resolution to something. And so
Yeah.
picking up that drink is a resolution. I don't know if that helps at all.
It does. No, it does. And it's something that I wonder how many people would, just really resonate that with that in general. Because now I'm thinking, I first asked, does that resonate with you? And selfish creatures that, we all, and including myself, are. I kind of thought, do I resonate with that? And I think of the last time I attempted suicide. So sorry, this posthumous trigger
No,
warning to
you're
everyone.
in the right
But
place.
but um, but I remember it felt coldly rational.
Yeah,
I
right.
was like,
Mhm.
I'm done.
Yep.
I'm tired. Like, I'm
Yeah.
tired. This
Yeah.
isn't working. I've given it my all. I'm out.
Yep.
And
Been there, done that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think that thinking about that as a state of learned helplessness and as that, and it's tough because giving up sounds like you're not trying anymore. It's like it's just a new solution. It's
Yes.
or for people in active use, it's like the ongoing solution.
Yes.
It's almost giving up of finding a different solution. It's like this is what we know. So I had been thinking about this nonstop for years, right? Like this is something that I would battle with every single day. I'd walk across, say, this like one bridge, and I'd just be like, be really
Yeah, be real cool.
and
That was cool. I got was like 5 minutes and it's
yeah, and so not Florida, but the distance will do it for us.
yeah. How is that? Is that 200 feet? Am I gonna make it? Yeah, I know. I know. Um, it's funny.
Yeah,
Sometimes, man,
do
you
it.
gotta laugh at this shit. First off,
Oh,
sorry to get dark
100%.
on everybody, but you have to laugh at this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in your experience with that, then, I mean, in a sense, that's very much what active addiction is like. With, drinking is a big one for me because it was easy to come to, it was easy to get, it's everywhere, it's socially accepted, on and on and on. But when you're drinking alone at the end, which everybody ends up doing, is that it that is the ultimate fuck it. is because what does it matter? What
Yeah.
does it matter? Right?
Yep.
What but what does cause us to continue to pick up that drink, right? What
Oh, this is interesting. It's like we talked about trying to, using to fill the hole, blah, blah, but actually in that state, maybe even that doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? Filling the hole
Right.
doesn't matter. We're just gonna do it because it's better than whatever else we know, have access to. That's the choice. So now throughout this whole conversation, the back of my mind is going to one of the first things we talked about, which is how does things like psychedelic assisted therapy work?
Yes.
Or how does any of this work? And when you're in active use or what have you, then what you're doing is reinforcing neural pathways that one, reach for that drink, and there's whole circuits dedicated to that almost compulsive use of it, that instinctive reaction, that habit,
Mhm.
literally, like a habitual.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's the emotional drive towards it. So how can something
Nope. We lost you for a second. Hang on. Hang on. Are you there? Oh no!
I'm here. I'm
Oh, there you
here.
are. You're back.
I'm
You're back. Okay, we lost you for a second. So you were going in about psychedelics.
Yes. Oh my golly. Now it's telling me my connection's unstable. So right, but so we have all these different ways that our brains are reaching our hand towards the bottle, if you will.
Mhm.
So how do psychedelics help you not do that? And the really interesting thing for me is not the trip, but after the trip, there's this weird window, we call it a window of neuroplasticity, and we're learning more about it. We're trying to quantify it. We're trying to better understand the extent of it, and that's the next few years of my research as well. But that is where your brain is more flexible.
Yeah.
That's a state of heightened neuroplasticity. That means that those really entrenched pathways of habit, memory, emotional drive that reach that hand towards the bottle, all of a sudden, this is the time after the trip where it may be easier for you to pick up the thing that didn't work as well before, the exercise, calling a friend, whatever. And that's something, a last question, maybe like I say last question, that's a huge line question for the
Next
rest of my life.
question.
But the next question I have for you is about what you just described. And people may start drinking socially and what have you, but you said at the end they're almost always drinking alone or using alone.
Right.
This is tracked with people that I've talked to who have, who were in active use for a long time.
Mhm.
And also when they relapsed, it would, when they were kind of like new to sobriety and it was very tenuous, if there was an opportunistic use, that might be hard to pass up. But if they had been in recovery and in sobriety and abstinence for a long period of time, the most dangerous fuck it was by themselves.
Yep.
And I, the first time I heard that is really stuck with me. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just trying to think of how that may tie into learned helplessness and the systems that
Well,
kind
it's
of like,
because it goes back to the helplessness.
mm,
And part of like 12-step programs are, stay in contact, go to meetings, stay in contact, go to meetings, keep in touch, right?
mhm.
And that peer support is is valuable because that does help you feel not lost anymore. You are in a space that is relatable. That said, you need to be open and willing to change lots of different aspects of that. You should always keep a community together, but your community may need to evolve because if you hear the same stories, you're around the same people, and we're all talking about the same thing, it's just like that rat swimming in the
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
That
Yep.
you'll hear stories that like, oh, I knew this person and they were sober for 25 years. They went, as we say, they went back out there and a week later they blew their brains out in a motel room. What the fuck? Well, you can say, all right, let's take this, you know, this concept of lostness in the pool, right? That okay, well maybe that person would maybe their pool like wasn't, they just couldn't swim in it anymore. It wasn't providing what they needed. It did not give them what they needed. And
Yeah.
through that, they just said, well, fuck it. This isn't working. It's not meant to be. I'm just whatever. So I might as well just go back out there, because that was the only time that I actually felt like somebody, because a lot of us, that becomes our identity, positive or negative,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that concept or idea or thought that people people need to stay engaged, right? And people need to not try and do things on their own, really.
We're social creatures, just it is how we are
Yeah.
either evolved or made, whatever
Right.
explanation suits you better. Like,
Right.
but we are deeply social creatures, and that is when we thrive.
It is. Yeah. It absolutely is. And so in keeping with the concept of lostness, it's very fascinating. I'm going to have to read that. But um that really to me resonates most with what the fuck it is like, is this feeling of lostness, this swimming and swimming and swimming. And um so we look at the psychedelic aspect of it.
Mm,
In I can kind of see where it might help a person sort of map out like a way out, if you will. Like, okay,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
lostness can be perceived as emotional or mental or physical or whatever, I guess ailment, right? Whether it's a mental
Yeah.
illness or a trauma or a physical ailment that's limiting them in some way, that after a while, the swimming, the lostness, they can't just do it anymore, right? Um, and that through the psychologic or the psychedelic treatment, it might help that individual to find sort of a new path or paths, different ways to get through whatever it is they're feeling. So the what was the other treatment that you had mentioned? Like electroshock therapy?
Non yeah, the
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
non-invasive
Non-invasive.
brain stimulation.
Okay. Non-invasive. Sure. Okay. Well,
Sure, totally different, but it
yeah.
is
Yeah, well,
it's
let's talk about that for a minute
okay, okay.
or five.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so conceptually, I understand the aspect of the psychedelic part of it, and I think we're going to do I think we've done a good job of breaking it out for people here. Um, so let's talk about the other treatment and what is the hope? What is the goal? What is the process what are we looking to do with this treatment? What is it? What are we trying
Yeah.
to get through, to advance, whatever? What's the goal?
Yeah, so the goal is so if everything that we do, like for example, the fuck it, is driven by a process in our brain, it is to poke the part of the brain that is driving that to either not do it, or if there's a part of the brain and its organization of information through space and time that helps us not do it from a don't do it perspective, but from a maybe do this other thing perspective, then to poke that instead. And that's a really reductionist explanation because, to be honest, the goal of it is it can, again, like we talked about, I talked about reaching for the bottle being driven from either a habit and compulsive use part of the brain and like how processes that govern that are formed versus negative emotions and kind of wanting to quell them and to instead seek, numbness. Like that's a different type of circuitry. And so typically, when we deliver this form of non invasive brain stimulation, we can only target the outside of the brain.
Hmm.
And that is unfortunate because that is all mostly cognition, right? Like that is mostly this kind of like goal directed, top down stuff. And when I think about it, I'm like, well, guess what? Most of the sort of like group work or worksheets that I've seen for recovery are exactly that. Like, I want to use, okay, let me delay my use, let me assess how I'm feeling, let me distract myself. Like,
Look over
those
here. Look over here.
exactly, and that all has to come from you. So my question is, the processes that you can't it's like we talked about eating the ice cream, even though the part of your brain that's like, "I don't actually really want this," you're still doing it.
Yeah.
Or me with hummus, pickles, and bread last night or 2 nights ago, weirdly.
You could do
Um,
a lot worse.
yeah, right. So my my question is, the part of you that you can't articulate but is still driving that, can we target stimulation? So this is where the next, honestly, like I've kind of just started this project. It's going to be for the next 3 years, but it's doing this on an individual basis. So I have
Okay.
people come into the scanner and they're going to play a gambling game. So I'm not working with people with gambling addiction. That is my colleague Brian Zafar, and he's great. But for me, I will have people, both healthy controls, and eventually later people who are using substances, play this gambling game because it probes everything that we're talking about: your attention, your inhibition, your reward processing, your loss processing. So positive and negative kind of outcomes, and the extent to which that drives the next decision you make. My goal is to take that data and say, what part of your brain function best relates to you making good choices in this gambling game? Okay, how can I deliver a very small amount of electricity to whatever part of the brain that's kind of driving that the most in a way that indicates it should do more of that? You should make more good choices. And then I'm going to test it. Nobody's done that. Nobody's done that. 2 years ago, I put out a review on the state of the field, doing this kind of what we call whole brain modeling, or virtual twins, as they're now referred to in the sexy term.
Okay.
It's for everything from like motor disorders to like whatever. And out of, it was like 9 studies at the time, maybe a few more, one tested it. And it was with an invasive surgery, which I am not interested in.
Okay.
So all of this to say is that I am hoping to find brain behavior relationships and ask how individual they are, and what are they that drive us to make good choices versus bad choices, and
Mhm.
can we enhance that part of the brain, that feature of brain function? And now we can do that in deeper brain regions, thanks to one of the labs I work in. So Nir Grossman founded this technology when he was at MIT, so now he's at Imperial. And it's a really, really neat way of being able to non-invasively target deeper brain structures. This is where it gets sexy, right? We talked about the lizard brain. We talked about these emotionally controlling, fast-reacting, self-orienting regions. Those are deeper. Now, before we could only target things that like had to do with like we talk about like working memory, the phonological loop, like remembering a series of numbers. Like that is not going to help me not eat bread, hummus, and pickles, or reach for the bottle if that's what I struggle with. So all of this is kind of coming together, and I've been dreaming of this research for years, and like I spent the PhD and skill set to do it. Now we have the technology to do it, and that's kind of exactly what I'm starting now. So that's how it theoretically works. It might not
Okay.
work at all.
So, so if I'm understanding this right, so you want to be able to, okay, let's just use me for an example. So are you looking to find this in people in active addiction? People
Yes.
in active addiction. Okay, so somebody's in active addiction, an active
Yep.
substance use disorder. That's the phrase I'm trying to use now. Addiction sounds better, but substance use disorder.
Mhm.
So through that, you would essentially, is it a mapping of the brain? Is it a recording of action in the brain? Right. Okay. So we record this action in the brain. We see that
Yep.
when they go to pick up this bottle, right?
Yep.
We get something that fires, essentially. We get this
Mhm.
motion in the brain. Okay. It's a reaction in the brain. So are you looking to essentially tell it to like do away with that? Or are
That's one thing.
that's
And that actually, so that's one thing that's had a lot of success. In very this kind of it's so this work is incredible. So this is Davy Thompson, like, and I think his first name is Patrick Mahoney in West Virginia. And they stumbled onto this almost by accident. So they use a different form of stimulation than I do. And it's people who are, just using opiates to a point where they're in the next week or two, it's a question as to whether they would still be with us. So it is active, just entrenched opiate addiction, opiate dependence. And they come into the scanner, and what they do is they deliver stimulation to the nucleus accumbens. It's the part of the brain that we talk about encoding reward. It's this kind of seat of encoding reward. And they do it while they're looking at pictures of their drug of choice and preferred method of delivery. So most people who use heroin don't inject, but if they do, it's pictures of rigs and tie ups and all of that and foil. If they're smoking it, you're still going to get foil, brown streaks all over, whatever. And they're stimulating this brain region while they're looking at this. And the results have been incredible because craving for not just not just heroin, but all substances, including nicotine, which is kind of nuts. Because nicotine is something that when you're not using, your primary drug, like most people in recovery I know chain smoke like chimneys, like that is something that just stays.
Diet Coke
And
and cigarettes.
and their craving for cigarettes is like really, really, really substantially decreased. The relapse rates are much lower than what they normally are. It's still early days. So the clinical trial is still ongoing. So the pilot was really promising. They're doing a clinical trial now, but that's the sort of shit that I'm interested in. But I don't, yeah.
Well, so then, okay. So this activity in the brain. So you take away the drug, right? You take away the substance. Now, is is the craving and then the reaching and using, is that the same signal or is it like three different signals?
I would view it as different signals.
Okay.
Because I would view craving, that's the first, so the name of the podcast that you found me through that
Yeah.
we got connected through is Craving Clarity because
Yeah.
I am constantly craving clarity and my boss hates that term. So Ann Langford Hughes, Professor Ann Langford Hughes is amazing. And she hates the name of the podcast
It's funny.
because we don't know what craving is. And that's kind of the whole point that we chose it is that
Yeah.
craving itself from a neuroscience perspective is just completely ineffable. Like we don't know what that means in the brain, but for some reason, but it's the most easily accessible word to describe this almost universal, like, feeling, pining, sensation, whatever, motivation. And so for me, craving would be one thing. Reaching, I'm like, that's the motor network. And then whatever the third one says, because my hippocampus is not encoding memories well today, apparently.
Yeah.
Um, but I would view them as three different ones. But are they all driven by one of them?
Right.
These are the sort of questions I have. Like, is the reward one driving the downstream motor one? I am biased to think so. Some
I
of my
think so.
data suggesting otherwise. So I'm really open to being wrong. But I don't know. It's still early.
That is intense. Okay.
Like
So
camping.
yeah, it's really good stuff. Really good stuff. So that does draw us to the point of like, then what does fuck it mean, right?
Yeah.
What is it?
I feel like the closest we got was learned helplessness from a more
I kind of think so. I think through that, it it re-engages something in the brain, I guess. So let's think real quick. We can wrap up here real soon, but so neuroplasticity, right? So
Yeah.
that seems to be a very big topic in recovery right now.
Yeah.
That I
Yeah.
researched. I
With
found
good
that.
reason.
Yeah. So essentially that is the brain repairing and relearning. Am I kind of correct with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Why
Like
not? Like,
like
yeah.
changing habits, relearning,
100%.
getting rid of old habits, learning new habits, essentially is what
Yep.
we're talking about, right? Okay.
Yep.
So in recovery, that is a big part of it. Like we're learning new habits, right? We're learning new ways to think, new ways to feel, new ways
Yeah.
to on and on and on and on so that we can sort of unlearn these old habits, right? These old
Mhm.
reactions. So, but the brain like holds on to all this stuff still, correct? So like you're shrinking an old habit and learning and growing new habits, but the old habit
Yeah.
actually goes away, does it?
I don't really think so, no. Like, I think yeah, I wouldn't think so, especially because we encode negative things and things to absolve negative things really strongly. I think, if I had to say, I'd say we just get better at seeing it, and when that's reactivating, being like, because there are times where I go to do an old habit or what have you that I don't know that I know isn't good for me, and I'm tempted by it, but it's almost like a passive temptation. I'm like, "Oh, I could do that." I'm like, "I actually don't really want to." Like, my brain kind of offers it as a default
Yeah.
suggestion,
Yeah.
and it just takes time and practice to not just click the default. Maybe?
So would the electronic stimulation then
Mhm, mhm.
would that help break and shrink a habit? Is that kind of what
I
we're
think
looking
so.
at? Okay.
Yeah, but that's what Daisy Thompson Lake's work suggests, is that that option, that habit is offered up as a default solution less. Like,
Okay.
it's not presented as much, like, it reduces craving.
Sure.
Right,
Okay.
that's one of the main outcomes of her work, is that it is like, the opiates and all other drugs have huge decreases in craving, so it's not even so people would know they're still, like, dependent on the substance, and they would have to go through all the hard work of, like,
Mhm.
everything else, because that's the thing, just decreasing craving, maybe that's one part of it, but then you still have to go through all the trauma, all the mental health, all that healing. What are you gonna do with your time? What's your identity?
Yep.
Like, how do you
That's all the hard work that I mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah,
I went through all that shit and it fucking sucks. I'm
it
not gonna
sucks.
lie. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
really, really hard. However, it's still better than being out there and doing what we were doing and tormenting and torturing ourselves emotionally, and not to mention all the other collateral damage that came along with it. It's a lot easier than that. You know, there's a part of me that believes that I will never be recovered from my addiction, from my substance use. On
Mhm.
whatever combination of experiences, things in my life that happened that led me to that created all of that, right? I'm never going to be recovered. I'm constantly going to have to be growing and reminding and growing and reminding and growing and reminding and not forgetting. A personal like nitpick or beef or whatever that I have is that people are like, oh,
Mm.
absolutely, you can be recovered. You can be recovered. And I think, and there's a large, uh, not contingency. There's a large group of people out there in and I hate this word. I say it all the time that I hate this, but the recovery industry that are like, absolutely, we can recover you. We can get you
Mm.
recovered. And I think it's a load of shit. So
Yeah.
you as a neurologist that studies the brain through a substance use disorder, addiction, whatever we want to call it, can you be recovered?
Oh my gosh. So I don't even use that word, because for me, who at this stage, let me put it this way. I my goal is to help people maintain a level of sobriety they want,
Right.
level of abstinence they want. To me, if they can achieve that, that to me is recovery. And it's not just a one off, right? Like, this is a sort of thing where it's an everyday battle. It's an everyday, or maybe not even, we hope it doesn't become a battle every day. We just hope it becomes a part of every single day, where you have better and better neural systems and environmental support to maintain that level of sobriety and abstinence that you want. To me, if you can do that, like, that is living in recovery, but that isn't being recovered. That's something you've done, to me, from what I've seen. And that's the thing, is like, I'm just a neuroscientist. And I mean, when I say just, because the people who live with this, they're the real experts, right? I'm outside looking in, or rather, I'm looking inside and trying to match outside how to the outside.
Yeah.
But point being is that I take so much of how I interpret my data from people with lived experience, and what I hear is that that process always changes and it never stops, and that can be disheartening at some times, but you just get the system to keep swimming,
Yeah.
and the water's pretty beautiful once
It
you get
is.
those muscles back.
It is. It is. I think we're gonna stop there. I
Thank you
think
so much.
oh
Thank
man, dude. Look, I'm gonna turn the mic off here in a minute so everybody can stop listening to us, but I got a lot to talk about still. This Danielle, this has been awesome. We're gonna do more of these, okay, everybody.
I can't
We're
wait.
gonna, yeah, we're gonna have a few more. We're doing at least a season of this, about 5 or 6 episodes. So I'm not sure where this is going to end up. Probably, I don't know yet. But anyway, this has been awesome. We're doing a lot of good by having these conversations. And thank you for what you're doing. It's hugely important.
Likewise, likewise. Again, so many lenses. So thank you for sharing your experience, the collective knowledge you have through being a leader in peer recovery, and helping translate what some bookish nerd across the Atlantic Ocean is obsessed about into something that may mean something to more people, and for just supporting their journey. So,
What I have learned is if there's one person that listens to this and it helps them out, then, we did a good job.
It's worth it. 100%.
Worth it. All right.
So thank you, people listening. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that. Listening back and editing it, I left a lot in there that I normally kind of edit these things to get them a little tighter, to go a little smoother. But there was something about just the free flow of this, a lot of the ums and ands and stammers that I left in because it just really added to the realness of the conversation. And I think that's important when consuming content like this is to, sometimes it's nice to edit it, to make it smooth and clean. And other times I like just sort of the rawness of it because these conversations are important. They are. And it's two people that were really enjoying a conversation, and to edit it up, it kind of maybe would have lost some of the charm and fun and excitement that we were sharing in the moment together. All right, let's see. What do we got going on? We have had our first Not All There Sober Soiree back on April 5th. This will be released on April 10th, and it was amazing. That will be up and online hopefully by the end of the weekend. We were able to record it, and we'll get that up and video posted through the YouTube channel of Not All There. Sober coaching available. I am your guy. I'm teaming up with Dr. Howard Gluss, and we have all kinds of wonderful coaching packages and experiences together. We're also working on live events that are coming here in Chicago over the summer of 2025, and you'll find us out and about in Los Angeles at the end of 2025 doing our Merge Sobriety and Leadership Summit events. Much more going on and working at behind the scenes, so please do stay tuned for all of that. A lot of really fun, important, and exciting stuff is coming your way via the Not All There, Dare Not Merge people. All right, I am getting out of here. I have had a little too much coffee this morning, so I'm going to drink some water to dilute that. In the meantime, be kind and loving to yourself. Be kind and loving to others, especially right now. There's a lot of confusion and emotion that people are feeling right now, and we need to do our best to be available to one another, to listen, to offer an ear, to offer a hug, what have you, okay? The best way to get through tough times is together. We cannot be separating farther and farther apart. It's just going to make it more challenging to find some ease, some comfort, a little bit of inner peace. Go find some joy today, all right? Whether that be a cup of coffee or, I don't know, a good old song that you like to sing in the car. Car singing really has been helping me out a lot these days. So give it a shot. My my tenant upstairs, she caught me at a stoplight belting out an old Robert Cray song. Yeah, made her day. She said, thanks for the laugh. So you can tell that I'm a fantastic singer. All right, take care of yourselves. See you next time. Bye.